It's MyTelescope Talks again. We have not been very good at being regular, as I promised we would. I said it's going to be every Thursday morning, European time. But the problem is, of course, that if I wanted to invite guests overseas, it's going to be very hard. I had one guest to do it in the middle of the night, but I don't think I could do that again. With me today, I have Sarah Fay. I was introduced, I think it's actually over 2 years ago, by my chairman, Steve Farella. And I remember the energy from that call. I was in Croatia, I was having a vacation, but I thought, this person is a VC in the US, I have to speak to that person. And the energy that came out was so positive, so I got very happy. And every time I have questions, Sarah Fay is there to answer them. So I'm super glad that you want to join us into this call today, or this MyTelescope talk. And the section, what we're going to talk about today is actually behavioral change. And the reason I invited Sarah in here is that she's been in the media world, branding, marketing world, which it's actually all about behavioral economics, and then took this step over to investment lands. And so I'm a bit curious, of course, how that transition was, and why she did it, and also what you've learned from doing that transition. But before we end up going into the conversation, I'll just let Sarah introduce herself. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Rodrigo. Thank you for not making me get up in the middle of the night. And hi to Steve Farella, who is a good friend of mine. So I'm here to talk about my experiences. I spent 7 years as an investor in AI technologies. I've seen a lot of the innovation and change taking place in the startup world, and innovation that's happening. Previous to that, I was a CEO of a media agency in the U.S., Aegis Media North America, which was one of the holding companies. Now it's Dentsu. And for a number of years, I was also, and I am still, a board director at media-related and marketing-related businesses, such as today I chair the board for Ziff Davis, and I am on a couple of other boards, and just kind of continuing as a student of the space. I still talk to a lot of companies, such as MyTelescope, which has been really interesting for me.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for the short intro. So quickly jumping into the section of moving from the media landscape to land of investments and VC. I did a similar journey, but the opposite. I moved from Morningstar as a fund analyst, and then moved into the world of PR and brand building. And people thought, like, why did you do that? It seems like two different universes. But it's kind of interesting to hear your point of view and your version of the story, and what you've learned from being in two, I think for many people, not similar industries.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, in the media world, you use some of the same muscles as in the VC world. There's meeting with many companies, and over time developing a pattern recognition of what are the trends, what is being developed for, what are the frameworks that are being put in place. I really firmly believe today there are early companies that will be really huge companies in the future because of the massive change that's taking place. And that was the case back then as well. When you're doing it in the media world, you're doing it on behalf of clients, and you have to roll up your sleeves and start using some of these tools just to get your feet wet. And it's different in the sense that you don't have to pick a winner when you're in the agency and media space. But you do have to start to understand the technology and get used to using it. In the early days of digital, we got into mobile marketing in 2003, that was, that was when it was still just SMS. There weren't even
Yeah.
smartphones at that time. We knew mobile was going to be big because everybody had a mobile phone. And so the footprint was big. And from a media person standpoint, you think about how many can I reach? But it really wasn't until 2012, 2013 that mobile really hit. Like every year was going to be the year of mobile up until that point. So it's like in the VC world, you also don't want to be too early because being too early is basically the same as being wrong. You
Yeah.
want to hit it just right and place
Mhm.
your bets with the companies and the teams that are, you feel can take it really far. And I think that those opportunities definitely exist today.
And how much do you feel of the learnings you had from the media and marketing world have you been able to use? Because if you think about marketing and media, and it is driving behavioral change, and I mean that's the whole purpose of it, and building mental availability and making people to make a choice, so to speak. How do you?
Well,
What of
look, I
that
mean,
knowledge?
I am no longer a VC, so let's just keep that in mind. But I
Yeah.
do feel like even still today, I hear from a lot of people because I have a rich network. So, when it comes to deal flow and things like that, I think that that's something valuable that someone who's existed in the business world can bring. And then, it's also important when you're looking at opportunities to have the backdrop of people who are working in the space that you can call and just check in on ideas. Is there a need for this? Do you see yourself as pushing forward in this category? How important is it? Those types of questions. And I mean, I think you could fill a stadium with the number of people that I've interacted with over the years, either have worked with at the same company or in other places. So I feel like I've always got somebody I can tap.
It sounds like
When
your
they're
philosophy is
present.
very like the ones I've heard from Warren Buffett, the ones that with the biggest Rolodex wins. So you can ask questions and
Well,
where
I
you
don't know if
can
I have
gather
the biggest,
information.
Rolodex is an old word. Let's remember that. But yeah, I've got quite a number of people. The hard part is thinking about who.
Yeah, yeah.
But that usually if I'm having a conversation, it triggers a memory. So, I can think of people to call.
No, because I think it's very interesting the part that you're talking about right now, the ability to ask questions and the ability to be, knowing what you don't know and then kind of reach out to people to find out. And I suppose that's kind of what you mean with interacting with
Right.
people and learning
Right.
constantly.
Also, I mean, I'll just say, if an idea is a good idea, you can count on it being pursued by a number of teams.
Mhm.
So you're always betting on a team as well. When you think about like Instagram, there were probably 17 competitors of Instagram.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, yeah.
And that was the one that emerged. And it
Mhm.
has, I mean, it has something to do with the technology and the ease of use. And it has something to do with time and place. Sometimes there's luck. I believe Instagram had some integrations that played into their ultimate success and acquisition of Facebook. And obviously, the acquisition had a lot to do with their further success as well. But the team, I think when a company is small, the team is paramount to whether a company can make it through the twists and turns and potential pivots that they might encounter.
Yeah, well, I think that the only thing we know is that it's not going to be exactly how we thought it's going to be. So, so we'll have to just be prepared to do those twists and changes.
Of course.
How do you? I mean, we're talking. I mean, the topic of today is behavioral change, and I think the biggest big change that we've all been together through has been the pandemic that moved and paved the way for many digital tools that maybe would have taken longer they would probably still have succeeded, but maybe taken longer to be adopted massively, like they have, like Zoom and Slack and other tools.
Right. And just e-commerce behavior.
And e-commerce behavior as well. How
Was
you
catapulted, right? I mean, I don't think we'll ever in our lifetimes, or hopefully we won't have another pandemic, but see something like this again, where technology was adopted so quickly out of necessity. It's like necessity is the mother of invention. This happened wholesale because companies had to adopt virtual meeting technology and the ability to work from home. And so many haven't gone back to full, entirely full-time situations. I think that carries its own, issues too. It's kind of like back in the day when social was adopted, we never saw the dark side of that. And I think there's probably some unintended consequences that come with working from home. But yeah, and I think, moving forward into the world of AI, where adoption needs to happen. I don't know if you've heard of Martech's Law.
No, never actually.
Martech's Law was developed by a guy in Boston named Scott Brinker, who works at HubSpot. But you've heard of Moore's Law, where technology will continue to progress exponentially because of, the number of transistors that can fit on chips. And this is true. I mean, technology is zooming ahead, and actually consumer behavior is going pretty quickly too. And it's very difficult for organizations to keep up with that. They're trying, they know they have to work at it. They're doing pilots and innovations and trying to scale the things that work. But at some point, a company really has to do a reset or look at what the opportunities are to disrupt themselves potentially. Like if you look at what Google is doing, Google's a very smart company. The emergence of Gemini has the, potential to disrupt Google search, or it most certainly will. But they'd rather be the ones doing it than somebody else. And so I think that companies need to think about those types of behaviors.
It's very few companies that dare to do that to themselves. I mean, I've seen, a lot of banks, for example, with the fintech industry, you can see now from the side, a lot of newcomers are coming in and grabbing a lot of market share, basically, and the banks are having a hard time following. Whilst I think what Google is doing with their own business, as you say, they are attacking their own business from the side. And I'm kind of curious, like, okay, how will they make money out of Gemini? I understand it's one side is, the APIs and, what other companies can do. But if you think about the whole ad business, which I think is still the biggest income for Google, it's going to be interesting. What is that new industry going to look like? Like, will we see advertising within Gemini and ChatGPT or Perplexity or other tools? What's going to happen? I mean, I think that's a really interesting question.
It's the epitome of placing a bet on the future and what that's going to look like. Because today, Gemini does not have the potential to be the same kind of profitable business that Google search is. If behavior changes wholesale, Gemini is a much more expensive product to deliver than search. I think a chat answer is about 80 times more expensive than a search answer to deliver, and it's free. At the moment. Well, there's some subscription products, but they're trying to capitalize on what they have and do a land grab of usage. And I think it's smart. But look, Facebook placed that same kind of bet on Meta, and then have since pulled back. So like these things don't always work out, but they, if they're going to play in the land of giants, they have to do these things. I think if I were to create, an analogy to where it needs to happen in our world, agencies, of
Mhm.
course. Agencies still have contracts that are time-based, and
Yeah.
AI promises to cut out a lot of activities and save a lot of time.
Mhm.
So, the agency of the future is not going to spend as much time, gathering data, such as like where my telescope fits in. An agency might gather all the data, and in fact, in my past, we did a lot of the things that my telescope does. We would have a slide that said, here is how all of the media programs affected in 10. But that was a heavy lift. People had to go find that data to put into the slide. Something like my telescope eliminates the need for that. I think that there is a way to reset the way clients are staffed, to actually save them some money and time, and to deliver value in other ways. If I were still running an agency, this is so easy to say. This is like armchair quarterbacking, but I think I would say, look, we're not spending time on all that little stuff. We're getting to the answers faster, and then we are putting our time and effort into the activating of programs, because that's what often falls to the floor, and that's what often defines a really, amazing media program, is the way media and creative, work together in bespoke ways in specific media environments.
But why do you think we stay in the land of agencies and holding groups? When I used to be part of IPG, I remember I told the leadership team that I wanted to buy in some software to automate some stuff that I thought that this could actually make our life easier and it would save us money over time. And the answer was, sure, we can build it ourselves. And in the end, we built something, but of course, there was no budget to keep it alive. So it was built, it was used for a couple of, a year or so, but then it was killed because nobody was there, because nobody wanted to invest in, keeping, because the business of an agency is people and ideas and consultancy and not keeping tools alive. It was, at least, but when I speak to holding groups and I talk to them about it, it's like, yeah, we have it. We've built our own tools.
I've had
Why is that mindset
there? It is. I mean, I think that, in some cases, agencies have built proprietary tools that have enhanced their processes and the ability to work well. If the adoption is solid and they have the ability to keep innovating. The problem is that with a lot of these tools, innovation keeps on happening in the category that they invested in, and the companies that are building them don't have to be profitable. So that, if money and capital are being poured in to the same type of tool and you don't have that same ability, you're ultimately going to fall behind. But on the other hand, agencies can't just keep on building stacks and put expenses in, or they won't be profitable. So they have to really choose where they're going to spend. And, there has to be a method of charging back to clients for technology. And, because it wouldn't be fair, I don't think, for an agency to be using technology on behalf of clients and to not recoup some of that. So I think it's just the billing and the contract relationships have to be looked at on both sides. Procurement on the client side has to get involved with that too.
Yeah, I think it's a hard question. I mean, every time I speak to agencies about this, because I know a lot of times actually speak about agency world, a bit of what stock, a hedge fund is. Because in the end, you have a client coming to you, paying you a retainer to help you drive growth. And if you think, if I put my money in a fund, or if I want active help to grow my money, and then I have a lot of specialists doing that. And for that, I pay a retainer or I pay a fee, whatever it might be called. And
I
in
hear you on that too.
in the world of stocks or funds, you actually every month get a report that tells you how much growth you've had, and it's automated. But of course they charge me for it, but it's embedded in my costings. So what I've been trying to tell agencies, like, guys, you should be taking a tool like MyTelescope or whatever tool you might find to report to your customers and say, look, this is what we're creating. And if you have to do it manually, it's going to cost you a fortune. But if you can automate that, then you can have a coin or like a index that you can refer to. It's going to be much easier for you to show what you're delivering for your customer, instead of having to, discussing of who do you trust, how much value did you actually bring to the table. But so then the question is like, okay, who should take that investment? Is it the agency because it's their part of serving to the customer, or is it the customer that should be saying, you know what, if I'm going to work with you, this is how you're going to report?
Yeah, and I like what MyTelescope does because it's in real time. Certainly, a lot of big marketers use market mix modeling or media mix modeling to be able to pick apart what did what on the schedule and what should they do going forward. But that's a heavy lift and it's expensive. So if you can pay, I don't know, I understand, it can be as little as $50 a month, to show how a particular campaign is doing. It makes sense. And, even a media planner could do that, to just track how they're doing. So, I mean, I know it can be used for lots of different things, but
No, I know, no, but I'm just thinking because this is where we started. I mean, my background coming from this universe, I was like, okay, how can I help this category or my industry to? Because I've always felt that we have to take, whenever it's a cut, it's always the marketing industry that takes the first cut. So I was like, okay, how can we? But actually, in the same time, it's the industry that drives growth and profitability. So together, of course, with innovation and product. But it's kind of the fastest to. It's much faster to put more money into ads or creativity than finding good salespeople. And I mean, in creativity and ads will be more effective in driving growth at scale, for example. So, but at the same time, it's the first thing we cut. So
Right.
That's kind of where we started and what I wanted to prove. But I find it hard because I feel that the industry on its own, it's not kind of willing to adopt. And that's kind of also why I wanted to talk about behavioral change, because it's what does it take to take an industry to change its point of view, so to speak.
Yeah. Yes. Well, what you're saying too, when it comes to like macro trends and how that affects advertising budgets, it just is the case that advertising budgets are easy to cut. And most companies do that,
Yeah.
whether it's showing an impact or not, because they have to. Lots of times. But the ones who have managed, it's always been proven, the ones who have managed to not cut their budgets during a time when everyone else is cutting their budgets have always gained share. What I also think is valuable is the ability to track share, like share of intent, for instance, against competitors. And that's another data point that's not so easy to gather to see, how you're doing against your competitors in real time.
Yeah, exactly. Looking for effectiveness. And if we take that, I mean, 2024 is the year of elections, not only in the US, I think globally. I think there's never been so many elections ongoing in the same year. If you think about the macro trends and the things that are happening when it comes to big data, but also questions or trends overall, have you seen any, if you think about this election year versus other election years, what are the big differences, or have you seen any big trend shifts that you think wow, the market has really changed how we think about this?
I'll be careful to try to not express my political beliefs. And I'm not necessarily an election expert, but I'm remembering back to 2016 in the use of Cambridge Analytica for the first time ever, targeting people based on their belief sets. And using data. I think that there was data used that was, not within compliance of how data is supposed to be used at Facebook, but a lot of data was used in compliance. And I think that there are still ways to target people by belief sets and a whole different way of marketing using content and, sometimes a fake news. So, this type of thing is just becoming the norm, and it's pretty scary. And understanding how people are feeling is important. Like they're the polls, and these days, I don't think the polls get much respect. Like, you just don't know. The polls come out and they show, a variety of cases in terms of like who's voting for who. It's pretty one-dimensional. It's basically who are you voting for, but I think that you could really understand more things at a granular level with the tools that exist today. Maybe MyTelescope, I'm sure, has an approach to that. But if you are a political team or an analyst covering politics, I think that you could get to the bottom of how people are feeling about things, on an issue by issue basis, on a regular level.
And what do you think? Because if you think about, and I don't know if it's only actually in politics, I think it's a macro trend in general, but like a lot of the communications that it's being driven by advertising or how we drive it, it's very, as you say, issue by issue and very specific and targeting specific audiences. If you think about like campaigns long time ago when you couldn't do this, when you only had one big media, which was radio and TV, you would basically do very broad strokes, and the presidential candidates or prime minister candidates, and depending on the country, they would have to travel the country around, and which they still do. They do these rallies, but my feeling is like the mass campaigning of the way that it used to be done with like a broad message trying to rally around a big idea has kind of disappeared from politics and campaigning. But maybe I'm totally wrong there.
I mean, I just think that it is indicative of today that there's just a lot of hot buttons, and I think there probably always were, but it's just getting more and more extreme, and because of social media and things like that, it's the sides of politics are very polarized. And you have a number of one-issue voters too, so it is important to know who the audiences are for that, and to be crafting messages for specific categories of politics.
And I know, as I said, I know that you're not in politics, but I think it's still, for me, political campaigning and messaging, I think tells a lot. And a lot of new innovations have come that way, because I remember in the Obama campaign, he also had this, they talked about this machine that could do, because they were doing this door-to-door word-of-mouth campaign, and they had this technology that they used, and it was very talked about. And there was one Swedish agency that was the first international agency to buy the rights of use this technology. So I think, I suppose that I've always thought that kind of politics and defense have been very good at innovating, and then the rest of us, we kind of take those knowledges and kind of apply it.
Yeah, it's even more important, I think, at the local level too. It's a bit discouraging that I think in past days, a lot of politics was about changing minds. And I think in these days, it's about finding the people who think the way you do and trying to find more of them and converting them into voters. So, you know,
it's
but
kind of the discussion in the advertising world: brand performance versus performance marketing.
yeah,
I suppose.
yeah. Find those lookalikes.
Sarah, it's been a fantastic half hour. Thank you so much for joining me. And as I said in the beginning of our conversation, well, before we went live, like you never know where we're going to end in this discussion. But thank you so much for joining me. And for the rest of you, I'll post this as a podcast, and we'll see you here next Thursday where we have a new guest.
Thanks so much for having me, Rodrigo.